Hello, students. Hello, students. Welcome back. Be sure to put any questions in the chat. As I said earlier, our next speaker is traveling and may have to reschedule. So if he doesn't make it, this is an opportunity for you guys to ask me any questions. So I'll give it a minute or two. Our speaker is connecting. Hello.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Monday the Mover. Today,
Uh-oh.
another good example of true cockpit research.
Hi, Larry.
Hey, Nicole, how are you? Finally got there.
Oh, I'm so happy to have you join. I wasn't sure with the time difference and the traveling and stuff.
No, it's okay. It worked out. It worked out just fine.
Wonderful. I'm going to read your bio as an introduction,
Okay.
and then we'll get started right away.
Okay, great. Will there be videos on this?
We are recording this. Is that what you mean? And it will be posted to the syllabus, and you can click the link from there.
Okay, I guess my question is, will I be able to see who's asking questions? Will they be able to see me, or is it just strictly audio?
No, they can see you. They can see you.
All right. Okay, great.
All right, everyone. Welcome, Dr. Lawrence Kuznetz. He's a 40-year veteran of the space program with advanced degrees from Columbia University and UC Berkeley. He was a flight controller during Apollo and helped build the space shuttles, and was a life science experiment manager for the International Space Station. He has taught at UC Berkeley, holds 8 US patents, is a private pilot, and the author of nonfiction and fiction children's spacesuit book on Amazon.com. He's had guest appearances on The Tonight Show and similar venues, but his favorite hobby is playing keyboard in piano bars and on cruise ships. Welcome.
Thanks, Nicole. With all that, I got to put a NASA hat on because everything else is just too much.
So
too much and too old.
Do you have a slideshow to share?
I could, but I think maybe I could just wing it, what the general topic is. I mean, there's a lot of different things I could talk about, depending on my audience here. So what would you say there?
These are high school students participating in the International Mission to Mars Engineering Design Contest, and they are designing a human mission to Mars, they do not have to include the transportation to get there. Things on the ground like spacesuits and transportation and habitats and things like that.
So I forgot, I didn't say they are doing that or they are not doing that.
They are planning the mission on the ground, but not transportation.
Okay, great. That helps. So I can do a little bit of a slideshow, but I think I should give an intro to why this is significant. They may not have thought about it.
All right, you have the floor.
Okay. So back in 1967, there was a law passed, and the law was the International Treaty on Planetary Protection. And Article 11 of that treaty, which was signed by all spacefaring nations, stated that all spacefaring nations will endeavor to prevent the transfer of any extraterrestrial matter from planet Earth to a planet being visited, and the transfer of any extraterrestrial matter back to Earth. So this spawned a whole bunch of controversy because it's not so easy to do. So the first instance of this, my very first exposure to this was we were about to go to the moon for the first time, Apollo 11. And what that meant, what that law meant was that you could not only not bring anything to the moon, but you couldn't bring anything back from the moon that might cause a pandemic. That's the closest thing to relate it to, extraterrestrial matter. That doesn't mean you can't bring stuff back, because obviously we brought stuff back from the moon. But it all, this law specifically pertained to extraterrestrial pathogens. And so in order to prevent that from happening, what was done was NASA sterilized as best as possible any ship that was leaving planet Earth going outbound. So that's why you see the rovers like Curiosity and being assembled in clean room suits. A whole bunch of people in white suits, and they're in clean room suits and they're in sterile environments, and they attempt to take all the robotic probes and sterilize them before they leave so that they will not carry any human-borne microbes to wherever they're going. And by the way, when we talk about this, we're pretty much focusing on Mars because that's where the greatest odds of transferring any kind of pathogens are right now within our bailiwick. Now I should clarify by saying we've now made a couple of discoveries in our solar system that have upped the probability of alien life existing. So, for instance, there's an ocean under the crust of Europa, and we're sending probes to Europa to actually see what's under there, which is pretty difficult. But the one that's even more interest is the moon of Saturn, Enceladus. Now, Enceladus has these geysers of steam coming out, and we've only in the last year identified some of the elements coming in that steam. And the 5 elements that have been identified are oxygen, carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus, and CO2, I guess. And those are the 5 elements necessary for life. So all the building blocks for life have been identified in these streams of vapor coming off Enceladus. So what this means is that the chances of all the building blocks for life are probably all over the place. So that means, where are humans going? Humans are going to Mars, and we already know that the chances of life, of some kind of life existing beneath the surface of Mars, have gone up considerably. So what does that mean for your mission of designing something on Mars? Well, what it means is you must conform to planetary protection regulations. And that means that to conform to planetary protection regulations, you cannot bring anything back from Mars that might start a pandemic, an unknown pandemic of vast possible proportions. And you have to do everything you can to stop that. And nobody's given this any thought, really. They've given thought to not bringing anything forward. So let me clarify again. When you talk about planetary protection in Article 11 of the Outer Space Treaty, you're talking about 2 directions. Not only can't you bring anything back that could be pathogenic, you can't bring anything there that's pathogenic. That makes it pretty damn hard, because after all, you're leaving Earth, right? Now, I know your project is not involved with how you get to Mars. You're already on Mars. But you still need to think about this, because as soon as you leave Earth and get on board this ship to go to planet Mars, you're going to be ensconced for 6 to 8 months. And you're going to be carrying all the stuff from planet Earth with you. Could be viruses, could be bacteria, could be any of the stuff. And there is now in place a rule that you cannot deposit that stuff on the planet Mars, on the surface of planet Mars. Now, to be fair, most of this has been ignored. But with this increased attention to the fact that we've seen the building blocks of life, and we also know it was ignored. I should add that my very first job at NASA was to come up with a filter somehow on the command module coming back from the moon on Apollo 11 that would stop anything from getting out. So back in those days, it wasn't taken seriously. You put a filter on the air system, ventilation system of the returning command module that splashed down in the Pacific. And the idea was, if you happen to bring anything back, this filter would keep it from getting out. And then we promptly opened up the door after landing. We opened up the hatch, the astronauts got out, stuff got out. We call this a chain of protection, and it was broken. It was broken constantly. The chain of protection really is defined as initial point of initial exposure to a pathogen until the final point where you exit any kind of exposure to anything. So in the case of a Mars mission, the initial exposure is on planet Earth. And then you go in a ship, you get to Mars, you exit, there's another point of exposure. And now you get back in your ship and you come back. And finally, you get off that ship and you return to planet Earth and you step outside, and that's the final endpoint. So you have all of these steps in between initial point of exposure through final point of exposure. And that's called the chain of protection, the chain of planetary protection. So you're already involved in this this project, and you probably can't do anything about the fact that you're on the planet Mars, and you're working on a scheme to build habitats and human sustainability and all of those kind of things. But let's just assume that now you are in a habitat. You've taken clean room procedures. You've done all kinds of clean procedures within the habitat, so that you're essentially not transferring anything outside. And now you get ready to do an EVA on the surface of Mars. Okay, so here's the big problem. I'm going to now depart and show you an image. So let me see how I can do that. Maybe Nicole, you can help me out with this. I think I've got to go to, where do I go to share?
There should be a green share screen button at the bottom of the Zoom screen.
Let's see, I don't see it. I see participants, chat, reaction settings, and more.
I gave you permission.
Oh, there's a green little check mark up at the top left.
Oh, maybe on yours it looks different.
No.
Hit more. Hit more. Pardon?
Oh, let me hit more.
See if it's under more.
No, all that is stop incoming video. Maybe under settings.
Do you want to email it to me and I'll share it from my end? That might be faster.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll just share it from my end.
Okay. So let me find it for you.
Okay.
While I depart for a moment.
Okay. We'll be here.
Okay. Let me see where I want this to be. Okay. Go here. Yeah, okay, so I'm going to copy this. Right, and I'm going to go back and get out of Word. And I'm going to go into Mail. I assume that's what I want to do. Can I?
Okay.
Let me go into Mail. Okay, I've got two things going on together here. You still with me?
Yeah, I'm just hanging on.
Compose. Okay, let me have your email address again.
Nicole, Nicole, W.
Nicole Willett at marssociety.com, right?
Just W, yeah, just Nicole.
Okay, so it's got your name there. I'm going to paste this. And image, call it image. And now I'm going to send it.
Okay.
Okay, so now let me get back to you.
So
we're back.
As soon as I receive it, I will share it.
Okay, shouldn't be long. It's just a small image, I hope.
Okay.
So, back to the point I was trying to make is that, so now you're getting ready to step on the surface and you've got to have a spacesuit. So let me tell you a little about spacesuits. I could give you a whole PowerPoint. I could spend 2 days on this, but summarizing it, spacesuits as they stand today weigh about 350 to 400 pounds. And that's including the brand new one that's being put together for Artemis, for the first moon landing return that we've had in 50 somewhat years. Just to begin with, the gravity, as you probably know, on Mars is 38%. The gravity on the moon is 16%. So it's more than twice as much. So if you run the math, a 400-pound spacesuit on the moon with 1/6 gravity is not going to be very heavy. You divide 6 into 400, right? So actually, it is pretty heavy. But it's less than 50 pounds. And you can probably handle the equivalent of 50 pounds on your back. But now when you go to Mars, it's double. So that means that the spacesuits of today, to begin with, are far too heavy for Mars. You can't use a traditional spacesuit. You have the image yet, Nicole?
I do not. Maybe reply to my email and attach it that way. Sorry, kids, technology.
Okay.
Sure there isn't a share button on that.
I'm looking for it. I don't see it. I see reactions, chat, participants, stop video, mute. It would be better if there was.
It should be there. I'm not sure. Maybe you need a Zoom update. That might be the reason.
Yeah, it probably is, because I think I signed on through the browser. It didn't take this.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I probably should have done it through my. I know.
Try more?
No, it's not working. It's not it. I probably should have done it through my iPhone. I could
Oh
switch
wait,
to.
I have an image now.
Oh, okay. All right.
I'm gonna download and open it. And then I'll share it.
Yeah, this is really.
All right,
There
can
you
you
go.
see that? Did it come through?
Yeah, I'm looking at it. So
Awesome.
Okay. So can everybody see that? I can't hear anybody, so I don't know. I'll have to depend on you, Nicole.
Yes, they're seeing it. They're seeing it.
Okay, so the first thing I talked about was the mass of the spacesuits of today. Far, far too heavy. The second thing, in line of what I was talking about before with planetary protection, look at the envelope of stuff around that spacesuit. This is Alan Bean in Apollo 12. Now you can see this envelope of stuff right around him. Everybody see that? Can you see that, Nicole?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, that is effluent. That is everything, stuff from the inside of that spacesuit that's leaking out all over the moon, right? And that the reason for that is because NASA has paid zero attention to planetary protection when it comes to human missions. Lip service, that's all it is. There's a lot more attention paid to not depositing stuff from Perseverance or Curiosity or anything else that we've sent to other planets, including Cassini and orbiters, which we've actually plunged through the atmosphere in order to destroy them when their mission was finished, so there would be no planetary contamination. So steps have been taken for robotic missions to make sure there was no contamination at the end of their mission. But we're talking now about human missions. And between the mass and this contamination, you're looking at two very serious issues. Now, that's not all of it. I just gave you two. The third one is there's an atmosphere on Mars. It's pretty thin. It's about 1/100th of ours. It's mostly carbon dioxide. But that atmosphere is thick enough to stop the mechanism of thermal control on today's spacesuits. Today's spacesuits depend upon sublimation, changing from a solid ice to a gaseous vapor to get rid of all the heat that's built up inside a spacesuit. They depend on a hard vacuum for the multi-layer insulation that the fabrics and the layers of the spacesuit are made of in order to stop heat from getting out and protect you inside the spacesuit. So there are many different reasons why a spacesuit designed for Mars will fail miserably. Sorry, a spacesuit designed for the moon will fail miserably on Mars. So when you think about a spacesuit, you have to start thinking completely different for all these reasons. So the focus of my research here at Berkeley and at NASA for a number of years has been to design such a spacesuit that can actually stop this kind of transfer. And I could send some images to you, Nicole, to kind of sum it up, or I could basically talk it through, depending on how much time we have. So if you want, so let me send something to you again. I don't know how long it will take, but let's give it a shot.
Yeah, just send them, and whenever they load, I'll bring them up.
Okay.
So as we're working on this, students, just know the spacesuits are extremely important part of your mission when you're designing it for your contest. So make sure when your group gets appointed, whoever is appointed, the spacesuit section, refer to this talk and these images.
Yeah, okay, so I think I can send this. I just don't know. Let me see, it's a PDF. Let's see how big it is. So, so let me get online and attempt this again. P4 reduce for, okay. Okay, so I'm going to respond to this, and hopefully I'm going to add an attachment. No, that's not what I want. Let's add an attachment.
Did it work?
Not yet. I'm looking for the attachment add on here, which I don't see. Funny enough. Move.
We have a question about, a student wants to know, have you seen the SpaceX Mars suits?
The SpaceX, they're not Mars suits. Unless you know something I don't. SpaceX has built spacesuits for their Dragon capsule and for Starship. In recent conversation I've had with SpaceX, they have no ability or interest in building a spacesuit for Mars, other than an intravehicular spacesuit, and we'll talk about that in a moment. Let me see why there's no attachment here. I've got to be able to.
Is it something I can Google image for you?
Let me compose from scratch and see if there's got to be an attachment here. This is crazy. Oh, there it is. It was at the bottom, so that's why. Let me find it now. Okay, that helps. Just give me a minute. I'm almost there. For all audiences. Okay, I'm uploading it. It seats 25. It's running. It's giving me problems. Let's try this one. Oh, what do you know? Okay, so I'm going to just put your name and send this blank. This is a PowerPoint.
Okay.
Okay, yes. Okay, so there you go.
Okay.
No subject. It's not going to have a
get it-
subject. It's just going to come
Pardon?
through without a subject, okay?
Okay, when I get it, I'll share it.
Okay. Okay, so you have all these issues that we've been talking about, and so the issue with a spacesuit is you just have to start out with the assumption it's not going to work. So what do you do about it? And what you do about it is you realize that Mars is a completely different place than any place we've been and any place we're probably going to go. And one of the reasons that distinguishes it has an atmosphere, and it's mostly cold. And because of those qualities, it gives you the ability to use that atmosphere to get rid of all the heavy stuff that's on a traditional spacesuit. So what am I talking about? So what I'm talking about is traditional spacesuits are designed to work like a thermos bottle, or maybe you've heard the term miniature spacesuit. They're completely isolated from the environment. To be isolated from the environment, you have to design them like a thermos bottle. You know, a thermos bottle will keep something warm or cold. It doesn't matter what's outside. You're completely protected. So the idea here is traditional spacesuits are designed to go outside. If you look at the sun, it's 250 degrees above zero. If you look away from the sun, it's 250 degrees below zero. It's an abysmal, horrendous environment. So you have to have this thermos bottle, which means you have to have what we call a closed loop life support system. Everything is recirculated. You have to bring all the oxygen you need. You have to bring all the water you need. You have to bring all the electricity you need. You have to store all this stuff. Just imagine the fuel for the entire mission has to be on board the spacesuit. But because Mars has an atmosphere, because it's cold and dry, you can do something that's never been done. You can make it open loop. You can make it like planet Earth. You can make it like, imagine going to a really cold place on planet Earth. All you really do is put on warmer clothing. Or a really warm place, all you do is take off a lot of clothing, right? As long as you have air to breathe, you're going to manage to be okay. So just imagine you can do that on Mars, and you can. And the way you do it is a very radical approach. You basically split this spacesuit up into two parts. You have a helmet that's completely isolated from the rest of your body. I know it sounds strange, but that's what you do. And the rest of your body, you use the atmosphere of Mars. It comes in through filters and it comes in through pumps and it pressurizes the suit. And then it carries away all of your body waste and then you pump it out. That's what we mean by open loop. It comes in, it's cold, it carries away all of your body heat, it carries away waste. And instead of recirculating it, which requires heavy machinery and pumps and fans and battery power, you just pump it right out. Comes in, goes out. And it's separated from the helmet by a unique patented system in order for you to not have to get any of that stuff in the breathable air mix, because the stuff outside is poisonous and it's very low pressure. So now you're carrying a separate oxygen supply just for the helmet, just for breathability, and that's what you breathe. But the rest of your body is seeing something completely different that's never been seen before. It's seeing Mars, it's seeing the atmosphere of Mars, which is cold and it's dry and it's perfect for removing all your body heat. So it's a lot more complicated than that, but at the end of the day, what it means is you can start tossing away mass, a lot of it. So instead of the spacesuit weighing 400 and somewhat pounds, you can get it down to 125 pounds. Now, a 125-pound spacesuit in a 38% gravity situation comes out weighing, 40 pounds or so, 35 pounds or so on the surface of Mars. That's something you can walk around with. That's something you can live with, right? So now you have a suit you can work with. The devil's in the details, but I left out one really important thing. Which is if you can blow the atmosphere of Mars into that suit, well, what does that say about the pathogens that might be out there? It seems like you're setting yourself up to just contaminate yourself and contaminate your crew and contaminate planet Earth when you go home, right? But in actuality, the reverse is true. If you look again at that picture of how a traditional spacesuit dumps stuff out and can carry stuff in, the ability to pump that atmosphere into the suit through a fan enables you to encapsulate a very high intensity filter. And that filter can be designed to stop stuff the size of a coronavirus, which is about a micron. So you can filter anything that's coming into that suit so that what comes in is not harmful to you. But it's more than that. Don't forget, the whole design of this suit that I'm telling you about is it's flow through, it's open loop. So it pumps in, it pumps out. So now you put another filter on the outside. So in essence, you're pumping stuff in through a filter, you're pumping stuff out through a filter, and you are not contaminating anything. So that was the most important design consideration on what we call the Mars suit, that it would conform to planetary protection first. And then it would have to do all the engineering things that we're talking about. It would have to be low mass. It would have to be cool air. It would have to be a separated system. And the list goes on and on and on. And that's why it's taken so long to actually come up with this design. So by the way, just so you all know, it's taken about more than 20 years to make sure all these thoughts and PowerPoints and engineering analysis into something that you could visualize. And if you happen to be coming to this year's Mars Society conference in September at Arizona State, you're actually going to see this suit that has been built and tested and has been proven to work. So it's taken forever to get it to that point, but it's finally at that point. So I think you'll find it pretty interesting as other audiences have. We've done this a few times, and we're well on the way to focusing this towards converging with the timeline for human Mars missions. I don't know if you want to stop here for questions. Oh, there you go. So you can show some of this. Why don't I let you show some of this, because most of what I've talked about so far is in here. So this first slide talks about what is a pandemic. What's the definition? It's a rapidly spreading pathogen of unknown origin that's potentially fatal. And you see it crosses domestic and international and aerospace boundaries. It's poorly understood. And that's why it took so long for us to get a virus together for, actually we did it pretty quickly, but we didn't understand anything about COVID when we started. So here you see the 1967 Outer Space Treaty I was talking about. All spacefaring nations must avoid harmful contamination resulting from the introduction of extraterrestrial matter. And go up a little bit and you'll see both forward and backward contamination control. Here you see Perseverance being prepared for its launch. And look at the crew in the background. They're all dressed in PPV, clean room suits. Perseverance has been sterilized in there before it gets on the launch pad to leave. Keep on going a little more. So we first came up with this strategy in the Apollo program. And this was my very first job, ancient history, but it's so interesting. We made an attempt to do this, but again, it was not taken very seriously. So go ahead. So we ignored everything leading up to the introduction of possible pathogens from where we were going. And basically we said, we're going to bite the bullet on that. We're just going to keep anything from getting out. And they didn't even care if stuff got in, if there was a very serious pathogen on the moon, it would have been inside the lunar module, it would have been inside the command module Eagle. It would have already infected Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin and Mike Collins. If it was serious, they would have been dead upon arrival. But that all was ignored. And so the idea here was, go back one, please, Nicole. The idea there was, we would only start this quarantine from the time they landed at following splashdown. We assumed they'd be fine. We assumed they'd be alive. We assumed this wasn't serious. If it existed at all, let's just start the chain of protection from the point that they land. So now you can scroll ahead. And here you're looking at this chain of protection, all the different ways from landing that had to come together before you actually got the crew and the samples back into their final point on Earth, which was the Lunar Receiving Lab. The Lunar Receiving Lab was where the astronauts were put into quarantine for 2 weeks, where all the rock samples came in. Everything that came back from the moon ended up in the Lunar Receiving Lab, but they started out in this aircraft carrier where they were recovered, the Hornet. And then you see all the different ways that avenues of stuff coming back. All of these avenues were possible openings that would break the chain of protection that I talked about earlier. So go on to the next one, Nicole. So here you see Apollo 11 coming back by parachute, which, by the way, interestingly enough, is exactly how Artemis is going to come back. Same way, parachuting into the Pacific. Now you see the command module Eagle bobbing around on the Pacific, which is exactly what Orion is going to do when it comes back, right? But notice the hatch is open. of all the crazy things. So my job was to actually put a filter on the very top of this thing, so that anything that the crew was breathing or anything in the command module would be filtered before it got out into the atmosphere to kill the rest of us, right? And with all of that, the door is open. As soon as the recovery crew gets to the command module, they open the door to let the crew out. By the way, this is what's going to happen in Orion. This is what's going to happen in Artemis. Same exact model. March forward, okay? So here's a close-up. So as a concession to that, the crew is asked to put on these biological isolation garments. We call them bigs. So they open up the door. These bigs are hot. And you're in the Pacific off of Hawaii. Just think about how hot all this is, hot and wet, if you're returning from the moon. Gosh, you've done this mammoth mission, and now you're being asked in a steamy, hot 90-degree atmosphere in a tossing sea to put on this thing, which isolates you, has no ventilation whatsoever, and put that on with the door open. Okay, you can go to the next one. And then you're brought back into an specially designed Airstream trailer. So you're lifted up by the helicopter, you're deposited on the deck of the recovery vessel, which is the USS Hornet. If you're ever in California, you can actually go see the USS Hornet in Alameda, California, Northern California, close to Oakland. And they have an exhibit for this. And here you see President Nixon, who's saying all the right things to Neil, Buzz, and Mike Collins. And they are in this specially designed Airstream trailer, which is under quarantine, under strict quarantine conditions, so nothing can get out. So think about all the holes in the protection chain that have already been violated at this point. It was just lip service. All of this was lip service. Finally, the crew, after that Airstream trailer, think of all the trouble, that Airstream trailer was picked up again by helicopter, flown to a C-130, and then brought back to Houston and docked with a special building, a lunar receiving laboratory that was designed to look at all the rock samples, where they remain today, for investigation. And the astronauts were put into this building and put under quarantine as well for 2 weeks. The entire building was kept at a lower pressure, believe it or not, so that if there were any bugs in that building, they wouldn't get out. The outside air could get in. It could cause colds and viruses and all that stuff, but nobody cared about that, because the idea was to keep anything that the astronauts or the rock samples might have brought back from getting out. So here you see the crew in the lower left of that image. You see everybody that came in contact with the astronauts during this initial exposure were also put in quarantine with them. So all of those people in that lower left image were put in quarantine for 2 weeks. And not just Apollo 11, but Apollo 11, Apollo 12, Apollo 14. So 3 weeks at a time. Everything they touched was burned, everything. While doctors and epidemiologists examined everything for indications of some pathogen that might have been brought back that could fatally affect the rest of us, or seriously affect the rest of us. So when you think about this and all these precautions and all the expense that was put into it, and then you think about all the holes, all the breaks in the chain of protection, it almost seems laughable. And that's why, to people who really were in the know at the time, they couldn't take this very seriously. You're giving this lip service. But you guys are not in that position today. This is a lot more serious than it was. And one of the reasons it's more serious is we've just gone through a pandemic that's killed millions of people. And think about that pandemic. It started out as an unknown pathogen derived from who knows what. Some say bats that people ate in China, some say a laboratory. Doesn't really matter. It was something we'd never seen before. That's why it's called a novel coronavirus. COVID-19, coronavirus. 2019 discovered the novel coronavirus. That word novel means It had never been seen before. So with all the trouble and all the disasters and all the people who died from something here, just imagine what would happen if we brought something like that back. Now we've looked at the moon significantly. We've had 6 missions go there and bring stuff back. We haven't found anything. That doesn't mean that there's something waiting in the ice below the craters of Shackleton Crater, which is going to be our target. And we think pretty much there's ice in it. Maybe buried in that ice, there is some really bad pathogen that we haven't discovered. So there's that possibility on the lunar missions. But we're now talking about Mars. We're in the world of Mars. You're in the world of Mars. The odds, the probability of this kind of pathogen existing on Mars, in light of especially what we've seen on Enceladus, the 5 key building blocks of life have been identified in the gases spewing forth in those plumes. You cannot take that kind of chance. You cannot treat this with such disrespect that has been treated before. So where does the initial point of exposure start? Well, as I mentioned earlier, it starts on planet Earth, but your mission, just assume that you've already been protected. Now you're on Mars, you're building your habitats, and you're getting ready to do an EVA. You've got to have a spacesuit that can keep this stuff from getting back into your habitat, into your return vehicle, back to planet Earth, that could possibly kill everybody on this planet. You've got to pay special attention to this.
Okay, Larry, are we ready for questions, or do you want me to show some more slides?
I got 1 or 2 more slides. So,
Okay.
what I want to show you that this doesn't end here. Now here you see this image that you saw before. So let's assume you built the spacesuit, right? And that spacesuit does a really good job of stopping anything from getting in and stopping anything from getting out, right? Inside, you're okay, but it's not perfect. It's stopping stuff a micron or larger. I mean, there could be stuff that's smaller than a micron. Or worse yet, there could be stuff on the surface of that spacesuit. You haven't been exposed to it, but it's in the dust of Mars. You've brushed up against something on the ground. You're out there doing EVAs all day. You're touching stuff. You're maintaining stuff. Something could be deposited on the external surface of that spacesuit. You come into your habitat. Now what's going to happen? And that's where the other half of the formula has to begin. So now if you scroll up, I'll show you where this comes. So this is all discussing the spacesuit from Mars. Here's, by the way, a visualization of the spacesuit from Mars that I just talked about, all the different things. And you can look at that later. You can send that to them, Nicole, so they can look at it. But we're past that point. Let's just assume we've got the spacesuit design. Now, how are we going to handle the handoff? And what you're looking at now is a suit that's been designed to specifically handle the handoff. It's called got a different name today. We call this the MQ suit, MQ1, Mobile Quarantine Suit 1. A reusable suit based on the Mars suit designed to provide optimum defense against COVID-19 and future pandemics. So go ahead a little bit. So what we did was we migrated the technology of the Mars suit, the filter technology, into a very lightweight suit that you could get into following the Mars suit that would stop anything from getting backwards to Earth from the time you're back in your habitat. So go ahead, forward a little bit. So here you see the requirements of the two. This is the requirements of the Mars suit and the requirements of the MQ suit. It has to do all of these things, but it has to do it in such a way. It can't weigh 100 pounds. It's got to weigh a pound. It can't cost $5 million or $50 million to build. It's got to cost a couple of $100. It can't be used for just 6 or 7 hours. It's got to be used indefinitely. It has to be reusable. It has to be sterilizable. It has to be. Once you get in something like this, you have to be able to wear it long enough to see that you're not having any symptoms. To go on. So here are all the features of this, and I can talk about these if you want. But essentially, what we've done here is we've established an integrated chain of protection from the moment you're exposed to pathogens until the moment you come back to planet Earth and get out of the suit. That also has the ability to stop not just an extraterrestrial pathogen that you might have picked up on Mars, but actually more importantly, a terrestrial pathogen that you could pick up on planet Earth that could be the next pandemic that could be far more serious than COVID-19. So this is what I wanted to get across to you. This is where the world is today. And you need to think about it in your design project. So I'm happy to, there's a lot here, obviously a lot here, a lot of stuff. So I'm happy to answer any questions because there's probably you got quite a few, I'm guessing.
Okay, anyone have questions? Feel free to put them in the chat or unmute yourself one at a time. That was an excellent presentation. Jay says, do you think that the chance of a bad pathogen on Mars is higher than that of one on the moon? Great question.
Absolutely. We have seen nothing on the moon yet from any place that we've been or tested that indicates that pathogens exist that are dangerous or at all. So we've had 6 missions to the moon. We've had 12 astronauts come back. They've lived their lives. They've been tested every year from the time they came back, substantially. There have been nothing to indicate that their lives were impacted in any way by their visits to the moon. There have been, I don't know how many kilograms of lunar samples have come back that have dust, opportunities for pathogen being within them, that have been sent all around the world for examination by scientists everywhere. There have been no indications of any transfer, any pathogenic organisms. But one thing that we haven't done, to follow up on this question, we have not been to a place where there's purportedly ice at the bottom of craters. And that's where Artemis is going. We're going to Shackleton Crater to go down into the surface of a crater that's permanently shadowed, where we believe, because we've looked at the data that indicates neutrons and hydrogen ions and the presence of water ice, we have not been down there. It could be like, I don't know how many of you saw The Thing, this great sci-fi movie years ago. We have not been to a place like that. Who knows what's in that ice? So I can say probably there's no pathogens based on what we've seen so far, but you never know what lies ahead. So we can go on to the next question.
Okay, a great answer. If an astronaut uses a tool, this is from James, if an astronaut uses a tool outside of a spaceship, would it also need to be sterilized?
Indeed. Now you might think that we've done this forever. We've been doing EVAs, God, for 50 years. Astronauts are outside the ISS with tools, changing stuff constantly. And you might say to yourself, well, hell, that tool is exposed to a vacuum. That tool, if it's not staring directly at the sun, is 250 degrees Fahrenheit below zero. Nothing can survive in that. There's no air. It's horribly cold, right? Guess what? There are extremophiles that have been identified on planet Earth that can damn well survive in that environment. There's a whole string of them. Radiolarans can survive in radioactivity in nuclear power plants. There's one, the names of
Tardigrades. They put tardigrades on the
thank you
outside
very
of
much.
the
Thank you. Tardigrades. Tardigrades build up a whole shell of. There's one that was supposedly recovered on a camera fitting during one of the Apollo missions from one of the earlier unmanned lunar probes before Apollo. I think it was Ranger. Where they actually brought back one of the Apollo missions, landed close to this unmanned robotic probe that was taking pictures and sampling the surface, and they brought back a camera part, and they were able to cultivate Streptococcus of all things in that camera part. So you never know. Yes, the answer is do your best to sterilize whatever tools you have. Long-winded answer.
Great. From David, do you think there are forms of life under the surface of Mars? And what would the astronauts do if they would encounter other forms of life? I mentioned this in my talk earlier, so I'd be interested to hear your answer.
Well, one thing we know, the odds of that happening have been up significantly in the last year or two, just by what we've discovered at these other places. We also know that we've discovered organics. We've discovered a lot of the probability of life existing or forming has gone up substantially on Mars. So how far down below does it got to be? Well, we know from the probe that was sent to the pole, I forgot the name of it. It wasn't InSight. What was it called?
The one that landed in 08, Phoenix?
Phoenix, yeah.
Phoenix lander.
Phoenix lander, yeah. You know, it came out with an arm, it dug a little bit beneath the surface, and lo and behold, there was permafrost. You could see it in the images, permafrost, ice. So ask yourself this, if you were a pathogen or a virus or some unknown single cell or multicellular life, and you existed billions of years, you were formed billions of years ago when Mars was wet and warmer and much more conducive to the kind of life we know. And then things started getting testy. The atmosphere started disappearing. It started getting colder. And that water started melting. So what does it do when it melts? It goes down beneath the surface. Pour water on anything like sand or that kind of regolith, and you see what happens is it wets the surface, it goes down beneath the surface, and then it forms ice. So you can easily imagine these life forms, if they did exist, adapted to kind of sinking and then freezing and then getting embodied in this frozen permafrost. That's where they could easily be. And you could even envision a situation where if you heat that permafrost up because the seasons change on Mars and it gets wetter, that they could then rise up. They could rise up and down. So we tested this hypothesis at UC Berkeley a number of years ago. We actually built a Mars bell jar. We put Mars regolith, as best as we knew it, into this bell jar. We evacuated the atmosphere and put in a CO2 atmosphere at 1/100th the pressure of Earth. We chilled it way down. And then we put a culture of halophiles, Earth-based halophiles, salt-loving bacteria, inside that bell jar. And we put it through a cycle and looked at the culture. And over a third of that culture survived all the cycles we could put it through.
So
And then
they're durable.
They're durable. And we did the same.
And what would
Yeah.
astronauts do if they encounter other forms of life on Mars? How could that affect them?
The only thing that you can do is you can prevent it from getting inside the spacesuit. It may be, as I mentioned earlier, it may be that they could be embedded or brushed onto the surface of the spacesuit and they don't even know it. And that is why you have to have a chain of protection. Yeah, you can design the Mars suit so it doesn't let that stuff get in and doesn't let it get out. assuming that the filter size you use on the Mars suit is good enough to stop it from getting in or out. And of course, you can always, the one thing about the Mars suit is the filters are replaceable and they're upgradable. So you can always get, as time goes on, you can always get a higher efficiency filter. But what you can't do is you can't know what's on the surface of that suit. So you got to sterilize it. So you've got to come in and you got to have a place where that suit undergoes some kind of sterilization, whether it's far UV, whether it's a wash, whatever it is, that's what you've got to do. But again, you might not be perfect. That's why you need the mobile quarantine suit as the handoff. So you've got to go from the Mars suit into the mobile quarantine suit until such time as you know for sure there are no symptoms. So unless you have a super onboard system in the habitat that you can completely clean, and you're sure you can clean the suit and the astronaut once he gets out of the suit to your satisfaction, you're going to have to get inside this mobile quarantine suit to maintain the chain of protection. Now, let me add this, that chain of the mobile quarantine suit maintains the chain of protection the way the Mars suit does. Nothing gets in, nothing gets out. So what that means is, in the event that you don't want to walk around with a Mars mobile quarantine suit in your habitat, by all means, take it off. Walk around the habitat. Take your chances. Roll the dice that you're not going to get anything. But the moment you get ready to leave, to come back here, you don't have any choice. You are getting in that mobile quarantine suit. You've got the whole planet at risk. If you want to put your own behind at risk, go for it, but not when you start coming back. You're not going to be allowed to do that.
Great answer. Any other questions? Do you think we are alone in the universe? I guess that's a yes or a no answer.
No, I think we've got plenty of company. We just don't know where they are. We don't know how to reach them. If you take a look, I have a lecture on this, by the way. If you take a look at the physical properties and the speed of light, how long it takes a
message to get from one place to another?
A message from one place to the other, and the fact that what you're looking at is the past. And the further out you go, the more unlikely it is that message bears any semblance to what's going on today. You will probably know, unless you can exceed light speed, you're never going to get there, and vice versa. They're never going to get here. On top of that, if they're out there more than let's see, what's the age of the Earth? 13.8 billion years?
4.6.
Yeah, 4.6. That's the age of the universe. Sorry. If they're more than 4.6 billion light years away, which is close,
we won't even see them. They won't even see us.
They're not going to see us. We don't even exist. There's no planet Earth. So they can't see us to even know what's going on. Why would they come here? That's the whole argument against UFOs. Why would they come here? They can't see us. We don't exist. And the only answer to that, the modern physics, the way out physics answer to that is wormholes, exceeding the speed of light, all the stuff that we don't know. So if you want to come up with a hypothesis that, we don't know the answer to this, but we can imagine it, go right ahead. The chances are whatever you imagine that hypothesis is, a year, 5 years, 10 years from now, it ain't going to be the same hypothesis. Completely different. But you get into the realm of science fiction.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Students, tomorrow at 10 a.m. Pacific time, we will have Dr. Chris McKay, and he'll likely be talking about astrobiology, which is a great segue from the end of this talk, and Dr. Ashwini Ramesh at 1:30 Pacific time tomorrow. I have shared with all the students your slideshow.
Okay.
And if you have any questions, feel free to email me, students. And if you have any for Dr. Kuznetz, you can email me and I will forward them along to him.
And don't forget, if you're in the area of the next Mars Society conference in Arizona, you can see this. You can see both of these things roll out and displayed in real time.
Yes, all of our students will be invited to Arizona State University in October for our conference, and they will be getting that information. So
Okay.
they'll be invited to do presentations there.
Fabulous.
Wonderful.
Thank you very much
so
for inviting me, Nicole. Look forward to ASU next year and other interactions.
All right, I'll see you soon. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.